objection sustained. Your hosts, Karen Klaus and former Bexar County District Attorney Nico Jorge.
1200 WOAI. This is Sidebar. You can find us at sidebartv.com. That's where you'll not only find the links to find us on Facebook Live during the show, but also after the show. Former Bexar County DA Nico Jorge, trial lawyer, managing partner of Jorge Norton Law Group, and George Araujo, scholar, former chemist, pharmaceutical researcher, and director. Here we are again this week. We had a lot going on, especially in the media, and I think the news still hasn't calmed down about Tucker Carlson. Not so much Don Lemon.
You know, poor Don.
Yeah.
What an idiot. No, you know, let me tell you, I texted, I thought I texted you and George when it happened. And maybe I'm too much of a strategist, you know, when it comes to trial stuff and politics and stuff like that. It's been rumored that they were trying to get rid of Don Lemon for a while. I mean, and he just did something stupid with Vivek, whatever his name is, and he was rude to his executive producer around live air and his co-host.
Yeah.
He's just an arrogant person. Yeah. I don't want Kurt to bleep me out.
Thank you.
But you know, and then when Tucker's news came out, literally within an hour, I just can't help think some executive said, man, getting rid of Dom, get rid of this idiot. I mean, they're not, it's going to be drowned out. And which happened. No one's talking about Don Lemon. Nobody cares about his ass. And they just jumped him situationally. They were looking for the moment. The window opened, and then they dropped him like a bad habit. I don't know. That's just my speculation. What do I know?
It feels that way anyway.
It seems like it. He was clueless. He's clueless anyway, but I mean, he was really clueless. So it was interesting. It just seemed kind of odd that within an hour of Tucker's announcement, this guy's gone too.
It does seem like they were looking for an excuse, right? And it almost seems like they found one. Look, it has been fascinating to watch. It really has. Look, if we've learned nothing else, can we all just say it? Tucker Carlson is more popular than Fox News.
Yeah,
he actually
bottom line.
He actually is. So he nets around 3.25 million viewers throughout 2022. Nets the same throughout quarter one of 2023. And by the time you fast forward to the following Wednesday after his departure,
they've tanked.
Yes, the milquetoast Brian Kilmeade is clocking in less than Chris Hayes on MSNBC.
I heard that, man.
That is truly at the risk of using a word that's used way too much, but aren't we in the world of the unprecedented, the upside down kingdom?
Yeah.
Well, this is pretty fitting. It's truly unprecedented that Fox News is in the basement compared to MSNBC, at least for that time slot. I think that's stunning to me. And I think I know we plan on analyzing this, Nico. I know we have some information we can go on, and other information we just simply don't know. Part of it's probably the nature of the contract, because technically he's still employed.
He's for another 18 months.
Right, and that'll be really interesting to watch right now. So there are some things we know. There are some things we don't know. I'm going to say some things, not a lot. But I think we need to analyze that. What in the world was so terrible that caused Fox News to at least miscalculate?
Nobody can think this through, because I've tried to listen to some commentary on it. People that are in the know and understand that world. That's not my world. I mean, I've been involved in some media stuff through the positions, through being DA and stuff like that, and some high-profile cases, but not like these guys. I mean, it just makes no sense. They're shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, look, I don't dislike Brian Kilmeade. It's not his fault. I mean, they threw him in because I guess he's quote unquote likable, I'm assuming. But Tucker's audience was Tucker's audience. It still is. I mean, as of yesterday, he had 57 million views on that little video he put out there. They really didn't say much. I'm sure his lawyers were tempering him, and there's contract disputes, and there's a non-compete, I'm sure, but because he's on the roster for another 18 months still, so they're paying him. I mean, I'm sure he's working. He's not stupid. He's built up a media company before. He's calculated. I think it's smart that he put a video out there. I would have wanted more, but again, I don't know what his lawyers are, I'm sure, advising him. I heard, and I don't know if this is verified, that his lawyers are the same as Don Lemon's lawyers.
Wow.
Did you hear that? I heard that too.
Yes.
Okay, that's verified. I mean, that's interesting.
Don, I'm on the other line. I'll call you right back, Don.
This industry makes interesting bedfellows, right? Because Tucker was just railed on Don, rightfully so, by the way. I mean, I loved his criticism of it. It was constructive, but it was true. But it's interesting, though. This is fascinating. I think
it is
Fox,
fascinating.
I don't know if they're going to recover from this. Although, interesting enough, I heard that The Five was a more popular show than Tucker's. And they didn't get a lot of advertisement from Tucker because advertisers were scared.
That's right.
But they had viewership, and they were just crushing it in all the ratings because you have The Five and that that interesting dynamic between that, which is good. I think it's good to have debate. And then Tucker, and then, with all due respect, Sean Hannity is not my style. I mean, I like some of the things he advocates. Laura Ingraham, nobody holds the type of
now
support
you've piqued my curiosity. I thought it was Tucker, followed by The Five, followed by Hannity.
And then look at mine. Don't take mine to the bank. I heard someone else, another commentary say that The Five had the most viewership. And again, somebody could correct us online. I'm not claiming that that's the case. I heard it was The Five, then Tucker. But Tucker, I mean, that's what I heard.
You know what? In media, yes, they have the most viewers. Somebody is ranked by the most viewers. But in media, the bottom line is who's bringing in the most money. So that is always up for debate. But when you have somebody like Tucker who can't really bring in the money because, just like you said, people are too afraid, maybe he was underestimated on what getting rid of him could have done.
What he was doing, though, it's like he was the flag bearer for the organization. Because look, the stock is down. People feel betrayed.
50% of the viewers gone.
Gone. I mean, that's insane from all their just in general. So someone miscalculated Tucker's value. Now people make the argument. Megyn Kelly, when she left, she had more, like a lot of viewers too, at a 9 o'clock spot during Obama years when. And then you have, when Bill O'Reilly left and then Glenn Beck left. I mean, so you can analyze this, the way Fox has treated their talent, quote unquote, in the past. But Tucker's an anomaly. I mean, he's his own thing. I mean, you have to give him credit. I agree with a lot of the stuff, if not most of the stuff he advocates. Whether his style, people like his style and his laugh and all that stuff. That's kind of personal preference over anything else. But I thought he was honest from what I could see. I thought he analyzed things objectively and fairly. I think he applied a biblical worldview to it, but he did it in a very rational way. And he was logical, and he wasn't afraid to course correct. I mean, he apologized, and he said, look, I was wrong. He was doing an interview with Russell Brand saying, I was wrong to support this war, do that, or whatever. I love a humble heart. I think poor in spirit means humble heart. I like humility. I like when people can course correct. I like restoration and redemption. I mean, I'm a biblically minded guy. So, look, overall, I think Tucker is a benefit to people to get the truth. And he wasn't afraid to tackle topics that everybody was petrified to tackle.
And I would argue that even the leadership at Fox were frankly petrified. And I think they tolerated him because he was a ratings machine. It's just that simple. And with the advent of Tucker and with Bongino, I said,
we didn't talk about that,
because I think there are some similarities there.
Yep.
These guys really were sort of pioneers at Fox. I can't believe I'm saying this because this is... I mean, they basically dare to say and question things that almost no one else will. And that's a significant departure from virtually everybody else at Fox News. I mean, every other show, I would challenge anybody to find any other exception other than those two, is basically sort of saying things that are relatively safe and that are digestible by Fox leadership.
Greg Gutfeld?
But
you don't think Greg? I don't watch him on a regular basis.
He's more satire. He doesn't,
But there's truth in his satire,
He throws out one-liners, and then all of a sudden he goes on to something else. He's almost like a stand-up comedian. I think he's very effective for what he does. But he doesn't do that deep analysis. He doesn't show cause and effect. He doesn't name names. Carlson had no problem with that. And I'll tell you what, if you don't think that the consistent attacks from organizations and institutions that I think are glaring, not just from the Department of Justice, comments about Tucker. I mean, this is unprecedented, truly, from the Pentagon, because he went after them. He went after Mitch McConnell. He went after mealy-mouthed Republicans in the Senate, called them out by name, called out the bills. I mean, they hated this guy. And so let's just be honest here. The donor class and Fox News can't be separated from an analysis on cause and effect here. They can't. And so I guess I'm not entirely surprised, but I love it that Carlson doesn't need Fox, but Fox sure does need him.
That's rare.
We're going to do a deep dive into that on our first segment, but a couple of other topics I'm hoping that we get a chance to at least touch on. I don't know if you saw the video, California high school brawl involving a transgender student beating up a girl who I guess was in the dressing room or the restroom with him. And it's just another video that we see where a man is beating up a girl. That just, the trans movement, it's not stopping.
Well, I pray it does. And people need to just stand up. We can't, it seems like this is almost turning into a COVID situation where we were talking about COVID and shots forever and masks. Remember 2 years ago, we were just, like, every week it was like, man, you gonna talk about anything else? There's nothing else to talk about, essentially. And this is, it continues to move. People need to rationally and logically be able to talk about it and talk about the effects. You know, ideas have consequences, as I say often, and the consequences to this are devastating. And to women in general, who is defending womanhood? Womanhood is beautiful. Women are fearfully and wonderfully made, as Scripture says, so are men. But I mean, the complementary role of a man and a woman is a necessity for human life, obviously, biologically, scientifically. There's a word, science. You're denying the science. I mean, the irony and the hypocrisy is a cornerstone of the progressive left. A cornerstone is hypocrisy. So they say that people that aren't for this climate movement or whatever, and I don't think anybody should argue that climate is changing. It's what's making it change, or is it natural? That's a different discussion. But you're denying the science, but yet they deny the science. It's absolutely insane. I mean, if you buy a gun, it's male, female, binary, non-binary, whatever it is. It's going, because corporate world is taken on. You have this administration that has embraced it and is advocating and pushing it. You have churches that are, most churches, not all churches, I want to be very clear, but more and more people need to speak up lovingly. I don't think, and obviously boldly and logically. And look, the debate doesn't go very far, because you'll have one or two exchanges of ideas and logic and reason, and then you'll get into the name calling, the yelling, and then obviously, as you just mentioned, the violence.
There's also going to be a big rally at the Capitol this afternoon. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that during the show, and if not, after the show. But we will have more discussion coming up next on Sidebar. Sidebar. Remember, sidebartv.com. That's where you can find any platform that we're on, whether it be Facebook Live during the show, Facebook Live after the show, and Instagram and other places. And also make sure that you know that you actually can become a contributor, a sponsor, because all of this beautiful video that we have now, you know, it helps if others help us. So be sure and go onto their website, sidebartv.com. So let's start with Tucker Carlson. It is kind of funny because I love it. I don't know. I'm the underdog, and I love it when employees are undervalued or underestimated, underappreciated, and I feel like that's the way it was with Tucker Carlson. And we talked about, yes, Tucker Carlson didn't bring in as much money. They called him, you know, he wasn't the rainmaker. But when it comes to viewers and power and obviously influence, that he was.
He was the backbone, though, to be honest with you. I mean, I think people look at Fox, or did, and I think Tucker encouraged other talent to be a little bolder. I mean, you know what I mean? So of course,
agree.
He did. I mean, because, you know, you see, I don't watch all the shows, I sporadically, but you know, The Five or Jesse Waters or Maria, what's her name? and other people, Laura Ingraham, and then you have Sean Hannity, I guess, and they have Brian Kilmeade, and then you have the morning shows, which doesn't I don't think brings in money, but you have to have news. I mean, so, but I think Tucker kind of set the tone. If Tucker's saying that, I'm not going to go that far, but I'll go this far. And I purposely, and I went out of my way this weekend. It was a crazy week for me, but I went out of my way to try to watch, just to see different stuff that popped up on my feeds, and you just sensed it. It was the elephant in the room. Even Brian Gutfield, who, again, I just saw one of his things, but you can just tell it wasn't the same. It's almost like the air was taken out of his balloon. And it was just hard because, I mean, they all liked Tucker, it seemed like. I don't know if they did or didn't, but they think they garnered energy off of him and kind of courage out of him, it seemed like. And it just seemed like the whole week was off. The mojo was gone this week. It's even the five. They weren't as the flow wasn't as and again, I didn't watch all week, so somebody can correct me, but the little that I saw, it just seemed off. Everything seemed off on Fox, and I think Tucker brought that to the table.
I like what you said earlier.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
Karen,
I
please.
was just going to say, yes, Tucker Carlson is gone, but I mean, it's kind of bigger than that, isn't it? When you see Bongino gone, you see Tucker Carlson gone, you ask yourself, and when... Please don't hurt me for saying this, but when AOC and The View are on, like, singing and dancing and celebrating, you're like, wait a second, this is more than just somebody getting fired. This is, again, party lines and stopping the truth from getting out. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Well, he said as much, right? He posted the video that Nico mentioned earlier, and I think that video is to say that video has gone viral is the understatement of the probably of the decade at this point. Holy crap! I mean, we're talking about 73.3 million views.
Oh, that was today?
Yes,
as of today?
That's correct.
Oh, it was 57 as of yesterday. Wow.
I got that piece of data from yesterday at about 20 after 10 in the morning.
Wow.
73.3 million views. That's just astonishing. And if you listen to the video, what does he focus on? He focuses on really a criticism of American media, and you can glean some insights onto how he got here. He's criticizing American media, and he says that they simply will not allow debates on the things that he considers big deals to the American public. They'll sort of talk around the edges, and this is what I think Fox leadership is. There are just certain things they don't want these guys to go after. I think and so Nico, I think we should step back like a true investigator and think, okay, what has Tucker Carlson done that is a significant departure from what everybody else is doing? The January 6 tapes, I think, have to rise to the top in terms of options.
Absolutely.
He's really a lone warrior in that regard. I mean, no one else obviously did that. Kevin McCarthy gave him. Kevin McCarthy could have given anybody that, but he gave Tucker Carlson that because I think he believed that Tucker Carlson would do justice to it. Tucker's been pretty good. He is espousing traditional conservative ideals, but American society has shifted so far left that even the most normal things seem like they're radical. And Carlson, I would never, years past, I would never consider him a staunch conservative. I would just see him sort of right down the middle. He says it like it is, and he sort of irritates both Democrats and Republicans. But because the culture has shifted so much, he actually seems like he's a right-wing guy, interestingly enough. And so here he is. He does this amazing set of programs on the tapes, releases 41,000 hours. We only had about 14,000 up until that point. So that really, I think, ticked off the people who are just deathly scared of anything about election integrity. Fox didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot barbecue.
But why?
Well, that's a whole other question. But that's a topic that Fox News, as a culture, did not go near, really. But Tucker, and he was a skeptic, wasn't he? I mean, from the very beginning, even in the aftermath of 2020, with all the election fraud claims and Sidney Powell, remember he had that sort of tussle with her and dismissed her as being a bit of a quack. He gave her an opportunity. She kept talking about coming down with a Kraken. The Kraken never developed, and he kind of made fun of that. So he actually wasn't a radical, pro mass electoral fraud. He wasn't that kind of guy. Yeah. But as developments kept ensuing over the months, and as data kept coming in, and as this fraudulent January 6th committee, so-called bipartisan committee, which is not bipartisan at all, kept sort of focusing on one side of the narrative, Tucker just kind of sat back and thought, something doesn't seem right. And so he blew the story open using the actual tapes. And I think that was a big hit at Fox. I have to say, I think that's where it started.
But what do you? I still am so confused about.
You look your face right now. It's funny.
No, because if it's the truth, and news is about giving the truth,
anymore, yeah.
How can anyone not see that this is more than just firing Tucker Carlson? That's what I just don't understand. And why would people celebrate the truth being suppressed?
Look, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall. I heard that Murdoch is the one that made the decision himself, and it was a overnight, and it was quick. It's like the Anheuser-Busch. I mean, those executives are gone now, right? Whoever thought that was a great idea. I mean, someone didn't think this out. They really appreciated the dynamics. I guess the word is dynamics. I'm trying to think of the right word, dynamics, at Fox, and how the audience really appreciated what Tucker was doing for them. I mean, look, I love to hear people's arguments on the other side. I want to hear someone that disagrees with me. I want to encourage that discussion. I had a debate yesterday evening with a friend on an issue, and we went back and forth, and I didn't cut him off. We didn't start cussing at each other and calling each other names. In the end, he said, look, I'm going to keep an open mind. I go, please do. I mean, I gave him a lot of evidence on the topic we were talking about. And we need that. I mean, we're never going to get stronger as a society if we don't have free thought, but a free expression of those thoughts. And that is a pillar. That you talk about a foundation, that's a foundational pillar of this country. We always talk about the First Amendment. And the journalists and journalism and the news media, the news corps, we're supposed to keep, bring questions and hold the powerful in check. That's theoretically what they're doing. Call balls and strikes, educate the people, because we didn't have social media in the beginning, and then people can make their own educated decision. But if they don't have the information, then it's a partial decision. That's the whole purpose. The press is not supposed to be right or left-wing press or left or right-wing. There's no pro commentator for sports on whatever side. A sports commentator calls balls and strikes, tells you what's going on, and so you can make your own assessment moving forward. And what's happened to the media over the last 2 decades, I think, is part of the reason, if not one of the major reasons, why this country is so divided. I really believe that, and then we've talked about it on the show before. Between that and then censoring the
social media,
I mean, the dissenting opinions, that blows and flies in the face of our Constitution and our fundamental ideals.
Yeah, I think so too, Nico. I do. And I think Fox is banking, for instance, on where are people going to go? What's the alternative? They have to go to Fox. And I think that's a bad bet. I think that's a bad bet because we're seeing a resurgence in independent media these days, and I think it needs to continue. Look, I'll just be honest about my opinion. I think Fox sucks. I do. I don't like them. I've seen a clear deviation from the philosophy that founded it to truly talk about news and actually give an unvarnished analysis about what's going on and actually give air to traditional conservatism on a major news network. And I think it's on that premise that the network grew to a potent level of viewership. But I think they've deviated significantly. I think where you really saw this happening, it started before that, but I think precipitously during the 2016 election. And I think you really saw it. I don't think they were friends of Trump by any stretch of the imagination during that time. I think it was a tepid support of Donald Trump as the candidate. And I think you really saw a sort of stay away from Trump in 2020. And I think that hurt them. I think I certainly was one of those guys that didn't like what I was hearing on Fox. I didn't think it was accurate. I think they stayed away from topics nobody else wanted to talk about. They were basically left-wing news light. And so I told you and I had these conversations about 2 years ago. I said, no, thanks. I'm not really interested. But for Tucker Carlson.
I don't watch all their stuff. So let me ask you this. I'm going to cross-examine this guy here.
Okay, good.
So just in very short, overall, 1 or 2 words or 3 words, what do you think of Sean Hannity?
I think Sean Hannity is
already past 3 words. Go ahead.
Sickeningly repetitive.
Okay.
I mean, he says the same crap over and over and over again. If I hear one more story about how he takes martial arts, I'll just have to gag. I mean, enough. I mean, it's like
You've
enough.
hit it on the head.
Enough already.
Yeah.
Enough.
But and what about Laura Ingraham?
And then he says all the stuff that everybody knows, about Republicans and that kind of thing. And I think Laura Ingram's an improvement from Hannity. I think she'll wade into topics more boldly than Hannity does.
Jesse Waters?
Jesse Waters, I think, is more of a pretender than anything else. I think he's a good act.
Okay. What about Gutfeld?
I like Gutfeld.
Yeah.
I think he is not afraid. He hasn't been given the platform, Nico. The Five really isn't a platform of analysis. I mean, you have
He's
five
number
people.
one in late time, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think if he's given the appropriate platform, I think he can do some very good analysis. I think he really sees things quite clearly.
I have to say something. I'm glad you brought up Bud Light, because it made me think the same thing happened with Tucker Carlson. You have a room full of people saying, listen, we want to put this guy on the beer cans that's dressed as a girl, has a costume on, and there had to be, let's just say there were 10 people in the room. There had to be at least 4 or 5 people that didn't think that was a good idea.
Had to.
Same with Tucker Carlson. And it was funny because I always hope my bosses aren't listening, and I know they aren't. But it's the same thing with work. And I'm sure it's happened maybe at your workplace or somewhere you have worked, where the bosses will come up with an idea and everybody's like, that's not going to work. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But no one says anything, because if you don't follow the rules, you're going to get fired, and all of us are barely making it, and you can't be the one that stands out and says,
that's bad leadership,
that's stupid.
though. That's bad leadership.
I know, but you don't think that that's happening?
Sure, absolutely. And then you get into situations like this. I mean, I when I was district attorney, or even in the firm now, I welcome suggestions. Now, look, my name's on the plaque, so the final decision is going to be from me, because in organizations that I've led, not managed, a manager tells you what to do, a leader shows you what to do, goes first. In organizations that I've led, the crap goes uphill. I never let it go downhill. If you're the leader of an organization, you take the heat. Period. End of story. But you need to invite. I believe wisdom is found in the counsel of many. Proverbs says that, and I believe that. And I put that in, when I made death penalty decisions. I talked to division chiefs. I talked to court chiefs. I brought in information. I wanted to have all the information, because ultimately I was the one that made the decision on death penalty cases. And so when an organization doesn't have that open line of communication and sharing of thoughts and ideas, then you find yourself in a pickle like this.
And so,
but yes, I agree with you. I think that
who's
happens.
saying you cannot be in the girls' dressing room? Nobody's saying anything about that either.
We are saying that.
We are. We're shouting to the to the one or two that are listening. No, we will talk about that coming up next on Sidebar. sidebartv.com. And then we continue the show after the show is over for about 30, 45 minutes. So please join us on Facebook Live afterwards at sidebartv.com. Can we continue to talk about Tucker Carlson? I was talking to you about my own experience in getting assigned things, and all of the workers get together and text, and they're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How is this going to happen? What would be the reason that, for example, Rupert Murdoch did he know that this was going to happen? Did he
know what?
That half of his listeners, half of his viewers were going to go
Obviously
away?
not.
Or
There's no way. Unless he doesn't care. He's 90-something years old and he's on his way out, and they say he's anti-religious or whatever. Man, you would think in your 90s, you better start analyzing what's going to happen. You turn into worm food, you're coming back as a cockroach, or you're going to stand before a first-century Jew that claimed to be God and did some amazing things. You got to figure that out. I mean, everybody should, by the way. That's just my humble opinion. But when you're 90-something, you're on borrowed time. So all that to say, I don't know what his deal is. I heard he broke up with his fiance because she really liked Tucker. You hear that this Dominion lawsuit, even though Tucker wasn't the subject of it, that he had some text messages that said some stuff about some of the other talent. I mean, okay, I guess. I don't know. I mean, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, spite your face to your nose, or whatever that saying is. I don't know the logic. I don't think there's any logic. Of course, we've talked about before, his sons really lean left. I've also heard that Murdoch, or whatever his name is rejected in the New York socialite circles, and he wants to be accepted, and he's tired of not being invited to the parties. I mean, look, he's in a tough area. You're in New York. Move your operation somewhere else. I think you'll have a different invitation list. But I can't say. We're speculating. My pop taught me when I was younger a lot of things. I used to go, Pop, why do you think they're doing that? He's like, man, why does anybody do anything? If you try to figure it out, you'll go crazy. And I've seen that play out in the justice system, which is the social experiment, So all that to say is, I don't know. We're all speculating. Fox has not put out an official statement on it. There's a lot going on. And I think what we're seeing is the viewership doesn't trust Fox. I just think you're seeing this.
That's right.
This they feel cheated on. They said, what are you talking about? I mean, and even people that maybe didn't like Tucker, again, Tucker brought a lot to the table that I think is underestimated from a when I'm talking about goodwill, but also just, I think, morale for the rest of the. The little that I saw this week, it was just palpable. You could tell even the five wasn't the same, and everybody was all over the place. It just seemed like everybody's chuckling, like, everything's great.
Who's next?
Yeah, everything's good. Everything's fine over here. Can't mention the name Tucker. It's like, we don't talk about Bruno in that cartoon,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have only been able to find one piece, Nico, Karen, that I think gets sort of under the hood. On Breitbart News, and it's a great piece. It's called "Exclusive: Disarray Consumes Fox News as Murdoch's Attempt to Reassert Control with Carlson and Bongino Ousters," written April 27th by Matthew Boyle, and so Thursday, and he claims to have spoken with individuals that are intimately acquainted with personnel matters at Fox, three in number. Okay. And gets into sort of the politics and the mindset behind what he believes ultimately led to Carlson being put on the train. One of the things that he says, the narrative that we're hearing about from Fox, and that we're hearing other people say in Fox to sort of parrot the official party line, he says it's completely false. It's nothing but BS. And what he is saying is that, there was a clear shift, as we mentioned earlier, between where the leadership is and where these two hosts, particularly Tucker Carlson, were taking the organization. And there was, quite frankly, a lot of power around Tucker. He was literally able to talk about any topic in any way he wished to do. He had complete autonomy, and this was fearful, frankly, to them. And here's what he says. This is some interesting insights real quickly. And if the 2016 election was one inflection point for Fox News, as one insider told Breitbart News, the 2020 election was another one. Fox's decision to call Arizona for now President Joe Biden days ahead of everyone else really infuriated MAGA. And this is where you start seeing kind of a shift away from Fox. And the only point of tether was Tucker Carlson. And so Fox News was reeling at that point and needed an intervention to stop the bleeding among its audience. Post-2020, when Fox was really hurting, there was sort of shift to the right by Fox to cover their flank. That's how they worded it. It's why they brought in Bongino. It's why Jesse came in at 7 p.m. They got Tucker to do Fox Nation shows. They replaced Shannon Bream's 11 p.m. show and put the Greg Gutfeld show at 11 p.m. And they generally became more conservative as a network. And so in so doing, with the hard push to the right that began when Trump won in 2016 and essentially accelerated post-2020 because of network moves to undercut him when Biden won, it just ticked off a ton of audience heads. And so it created this kind of bifurcation at Fox where they called it, these guys called it a Wild West environment at Fox News, where you have Bongino and Carlson really with this conservative inertia, and then there's the rest of the network. And then sort of what brought all of this to the head is the Dominion suit. That's in their view when everything changed, because Fox settling for nearly $800 million, and you got people, we were talking about this, we were aghast. Why the hell would they do that? I mean, you actually have to prove malice, do you not?
Right.
I mean, it's a tall hurdle. Fox, it seems to me, had every opportunity to win the case. During discovery, I'm wondering, Nico, because there were all kinds of statements made by Dominion officials about problems with their own machines. Some of these statements were made in public. Eric Coomer, who was an executive with Dominion, actually said that there are all kinds of itty bugs, fill in the blanks, with those machines. I mean, this is a public statement by a Dominion dude,
right,
and there's email correspondence. So my point is, Fox had every opportunity to win this, but they ran from it. And so they settled for $800 million. They thought that was a great thing, but they're looking at the Smartmatic lawsuit that's coming down, another company with election machines. They're looking at a lawsuit that's being filed, I guess, by Abby Grossberg, which is a producer of the show. She's saying that Tucker Carlson, by the way, Tucker Carlson never met her, but she's making the claim that he created a hostile environment, I guess a difficult work environment. So this is all coming down on Fox, and Fox is saying, you know what, we need to reinsert control. And this is where they basically end their article, which I think is really interesting. And they said several sources familiar, said that the Murdochs are moving to reestablish control over media. And by ousting Carlson, they sent a message internally to everyone else to remember who's in charge. And here's the analogy they use, and I'll shut up. It's like when in your first day in prison, you find the biggest, baddest, meanest dude in the yard, and you beat the living blank out of him. From that day forward, everyone knows not to F with you. That's when the Murdochs just did. That's what the Murdochs just did by getting rid of Tucker and Dan. Anyone who would have challenged their vision for the direction of this company has learned that if you F around, you will find out something not so good for yourself. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, be careful the world you help create, because someday you have to live in it. So now the problem is this is not a prison yard. I agree with that, in a prison yard, because you want to survive and you don't want someone, hurting you or doing something to you that you don't want done. So you have to establish dominance. That's a kill or be killed situation. That's a survival of the fittest. This is not a kill or be killed situation. This is all about the eyeballs. So you've got to know your audience. It doesn't matter what I think when I'm in front of a jury. All I care about is what the jury thinks. And so this is where this is a separation from reality and cognitive dissonance, or whatever you want to call it. That is just absolute. If that's their thinking, they're stupid. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to establish dominance and control and being a coach of a basketball team. For as much as I disagree with Coach Popovich's politics, he had control for many years over that team. I mean, nobody questioned Pop. He'd benched the starting player if they did not follow the way he did things to acquire those championships and have the success they did. Now, you need that type of, but you need that trust also, that the people that work under you and look to you for leadership can trust your decisions because they trust your character. When you have an organization where people do not trust your character, you have dissension, you have backstabbing. If people can trust your character, which ultimately means what? They can trust your decisions. That's when you have a healthy organization. And these guys, whether it's just because the guy's out, he's getting ready to check out from this world, or he's lost his mind. I heard there's mental stuff. I have no idea. I don't like rumors, or his kids are just, the daddy handed him over this silver platter and now they've dropped it. I don't know what the deal is. I hope we're going to find out eventually, but that's a horrible decision if that's their logic.
Yeah, Karen, I was going to ask, you've been in media a long time. Between the blowback that we've seen from the audience at Fox and what what we're discussing this piece here is alleging. It doesn't seem like Fox is making an intelligent business decision, to put it mildly, but it also seems like Fox is not our friend, right? I mean, they seem to be departing from grassroots conservatism, and the audience is sending a message, and they're basically saying,
but
we don't care.
That's exactly, anybody knows that in business, money is the bottom line. And if they believed that since Tucker Carlson didn't bring in the money that other shows brought in, that it wasn't going to matter. I tell you, if they think somebody's going to bring in the money and that they don't
elaborate
follow
on that.
through.
What do you mean Tucker Carlson didn't bring in the money from a media
Advertisers were too afraid to be on his show.
Yeah.
There you go.
And so he was the guy that had the most viewers, but didn't bring in the most money because they...
But they underestimated, like we said earlier, what he brought to the organization and the morale there. I mean, I think you're seeing this clearly. Tucker was the mascot, so to speak, and he's running with the flag. The mascot doesn't score the points, but the mascot encourages people. I mean, look at the coyote. Everybody loves the damn coyote. I mean, so the coyote doesn't do anything, but but that's, Tucker was more than that. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying it's that type of morale, in my humble opinion. And so this has just been and look, if they try to do anything, if they try to do what Anheuser-Busch does, did you see that stupid commercial? It was completely, it's a great commercial if they hadn't done the insanity of the can 100%. Celebrating the 365 days of quote unquote womanhood. But it was supposed to be this pro-America, conservative, traditional commercial, and everybody called BS on it. I don't know what Fox does to come back from this. I really don't. This is not going away because people have just, they've cheated on their audience, so to speak. And you're not going to build that up overnight.
I so agree. I have goosebumps when you said that. Somebody's got to say something. We have one more segment on Sidebar here on WOAI. We'll be right back.
We have the knowledge to defend you in federal or state court, no matter how small or large your case. We are trial lawyers with proven success.
Sidebar on WOAI with former Bexar County DA Nico Jorge and Georgia Rougeau. I'm going to tell you, we're going to start a new topic right now, but remember, if you go to sidebartv.com, you can continue being a part of the show by being on Facebook Live with us. I try to get a chance to look at all of the comments and talk to people so that everybody that's listening can become a part of the show. So as we transition seems to be
tough crowd.
Use that word anymore.
Something that we just cannot stop talking about because it's not going anywhere. And you were telling me, and George, I have to be honest, I did not research the story, but you were telling me that there was a teacher in Florida. Can you please tell us the story?
I was simply following up on your theme that you guys had brought up earlier of this sort of trans-militarism continuing in the media, just looking the other way. We brought the California story of the kid who is identifying as a female and decides to beating up other real females is a good idea, right? Karen, you were just talking about that. Mm-hmm. So on March 24th, Alec Renzowski, who's a teacher at Fox Chapel Hill Middle School in Florida, decides to go talk to an administrator there at the school. I believe it was a guidance counselor, and states that considering suicide. This is a dude who identifies as a female, yes, uses she, her pronouns, and apparently saw some social media posts that looked negatively on him identifying as a female, and he was distressed by it and rather irritated and angry by it, considering suicide, and he said that he was also considering shooting some students.
Oh, wow.
That same day, as we understand, and you can read this piece. Unfortunately, you can't read it in very many places because the media doesn't report it widely as it should. They only wait until there's actually a tragedy, and then they blame people for actually owning guns. They blame it on gun control, right? That's the only time the media cares about this kind of stuff. But you can read it on Daily Mail. You can even read it on the Epic Times, and you can read it on some local Florida networks. But that's how this was discovered. That same day, they reported to the sheriff's department. The sheriff went to the residence and confiscated guns. The parents weren't notified of this thing. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks later that it was reported in a local news outlet. Parents became infuriated by this. That was March 24th when he went to talk to an administrator. A month later, on April 25th, they had literally a few days ago, they had a meeting. It was basically a school board meeting. And about 80% of the individuals that attended were teachers and administrators, and they were all dressed in rainbow attire, clearly showing solidarity around not just the superintendent who decided not to report this to the parents, but also for the trans movement, the LGBT, as I call it, a cult that I think politically insulates these individuals from any kind of criticism. And so they basically the parents had to kind of fight their way in to be heard. And you should have heard these parents passionately make rather understandable common sense arguments, and the media didn't touch this thing. Virtually no one knows about it. And you actually had a doubling down around this individual as if, I mean, these
look how the Nashville shooting was reported. I mean, it was literally reported as if there was this attack on trans people and they're being, separated. They're being, criticized and all this other stuff. Forget about the 3 9-year-olds. They were just murdered, and the 3 adults.
Yes,
but
right.
This fits in what you're saying.
It does. But it's almost like you gotta. This is the other side then. So they're acting like victims in that situation, Nico, when the real victims don't get airtime on major media. Those precious 3 children and the 3 adults that lost their lives. But in this case, you actually had teachers and administrators go militant against the parents, call them bigots, call them spreaders of disinformation. Like they don't have a right to be upset that news was kept from them. And then they went nuts on one particular school board member because she dared side with the parents. This is an outward attack, a blatant attack on the parents. The parents virtually had no airtime.
But this is the point. This is why this needs to be handled and responded to appropriately. Because I'm telling you, I don't want this to happen. I just know when parents and people feel like there's no discourse, that you can't talk, and that we're just throwing reason out the window and we're forgetting biology and science, what's going to happen? Is it going to be whoever's loudest, whoever's pushes more, literally and figuratively, whoever is more aggressive? I mean, is that what it turns into? It truly turns into survival of the fittest. That is not the way this society was set up, and it will not flourish that way. I assure you. Not maybe, I assure you it will not. There's 2 ways to govern a government. We talked about that, a country. It's either through persuasion or through force. And when people can't persuade anymore and they can't share their thoughts and they can't freely express those thoughts, then people use force. And that's what you do not want. Let me say this again. You do not want this. Everybody talks about, we needed this, we need a civil war, they don't even know it. Unless you've been in combat, either in the streets or in war or in a shooting situation or trained for combat, you don't want it. And even if you have, you don't want it. Most people that have been in it and understand violence don't want it. You just don't. I mean, I've trained a lot, and I've been in a lot of physical confrontations. I don't want that for my kids, but I want them ready for it. I mean, you don't want this for a society to flourish. You cannot exchange ideas.
It's a great point.
You can't do that. Yep. You cannot do business. You cannot learn. You cannot educate yourself. We can't even go to universities anymore. This idea of unity and diversity, which is what university truly means, unity in diversity. We welcome diverse thought. We welcome diverse opinions. We debate them in the court of public opinion. and then the society decides. Society will put a stupid idea on the shelf. But if you can't share ideas, and that's why this trans religious movement wants to shut people up with violence. They don't want to have a discussion. Because they can't win on the facts. And that's why I will always elevate someone like a Bill Maher, Russell Brand, people that maybe I disagree with on other topics that we can passionately disagree later on, but on the essentials, on cancel culture, on silence and violence and all this other stuff, you've got to speak out against that, because if we don't have an arena where the exchange of ideas flourish, we have a Royal Rumble, and that's what we don't want for our children. I don't.
I just worry that the more we talk about civil war, we begin to normalize it.
Ugh, and you do not want that.
The more likely you sort of just kind of coast into that. And you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean,
where are the churches? Every pastor should be talking about this. Every single pastor, and very few are. I mean, from what I've seen, I mean, I know CBC has talked about it. I know Pastor Ed Newton has talked about stuff like that very lovingly and from a biblical perspective. I know Cornerstone talks about it. I know our church, Hillside, talks about it. Hillside Fellowship.
True.
I mean, there are certain churches, and I'm not trying to leave churches out just because I don't know. But I mean, people need to know that if you're in a church, and I say this lovingly, you should talk to your pastor and say, look, we got to address this from a biblical perspective. I mean, even Islamic people need it their imams talk about it, because Christians are the only ones attacked on this. If you look at Islamic ideology, I mean, they do not support this. I was watching a guy that was advocating Islamic ideology, and he's a Muslim, and he was on with Value Entertainment. I just saw a 7-minute clip. And he was just, I mean, he wasn't even trying to be gentle about it. He was just like, look, this is just not acceptable. And he talked about his ideology from the Quran and the Hadith and the Sirah and that ideology. And they were going back and forth about it. Look, we need to lovingly address this, of course. But there's a reason why, to Bill Maher's point, as he's talked about on his show a numerous times, why this continues to grow, why more kids identified. They are being indoctrinated. There was a video I sent you guys, I think last night or this morning, about a Canada show where they're just having a drag queen with kids saying, can kids dress up in drag? Sure, of course you can. And they're normalizing it with children. But not just that. I don't want anybody talking about heterosexual sex with children. Talk about unicorns and pirates and cowboys and Indians and Star Wars and superheroes. Let them have the wonder and the innocence of developing their thoughts in their mind. Build them up in the basics, reading, arithmetic, and math, and talk and English, and civility, and how to act in the government, and how the government works, all that kind of stuff, and your family values. But the children need to be children. We've got to be able to engage this. We should support anybody that will push back against this. We've got to make sure that people that disagree and believe in a traditional, scientific, dare I say, scientific worldview on this and perspective on this need to be able to talk about this. And reason and logic and basic biology has to prevail. It has to prevail. I saw last night, and I'll shut up. There was a clip out there about that doctor. What's that show? My wife watched it for the very first time it came out, where that doctor's on the spectrum of autism. Do you know what it is, Dom?
I don't know.
It's a show where he's a doctor, and he's on the spectrum of autism, obviously very high functioning as a doctor. We have a child on the spectrum, and that's why Davi watched it. And they were talking about this transgender little kid. It was a clip from the show. There's something wrong with me. I'm a girl, and this, that, and the other. Where they found out, they did a scan on him, and he had testicular cancer. It had nothing to do with his appendix. And then he goes, well, we got to talk to her. And then the doctor on the spectrum goes, where in our medical training do we have transgender biology versus just biology? Because he's very black and white. And then the guy was like, it just stumped him, right? We've got to stick within logic and reason and basic biology and science, and we should lovingly address people that are dealing with this issue. We should, but we should boldly stand for truth. And if we don't, this is going to continue to snowball.
I don't want to bring up a whole another topic, but we'll continue it. But as you always say, where's the church in this? But where are the teachers' unions in this? And how do we not?
We know where they were. They were there. The teachers' unions are backing up this hostility, this outright attack against parents. They want to marginalize parents or being wholly inadequate to say anything. In fact, at this meeting, one of the things I thought was interesting is because it was unbelievable. I mean, I couldn't believe this was happening in America.
Did you see it, or you just read about it?
I read the transcript.
Okay.
And so I'm always wondering, I'm always a little concerned about videos because I'm wondering if they're pulling out snippets. So I like to get a transcript of that, and I like to read who's saying what back and forth. And what I noticed is that this was this sort of browbeating of parents through credentializing. The teachers kept talking about their credentials, and they should be listened to, Karen, because they have credentials.
Yeah.
Now, never mind, they're complete morons, right? Who should really be supporting the parents and really working alongside the parents. But it was all about their credentials, you know. Boy, how things have changed. Go ahead.
Oh, by the way, your mom said it's The Good Doctor.
Oh, my mom
The name of the show,
watching.
yes.
Thanks, Mom. It's a good doctor.
Bro, you're waving. And I mean, you're waving like you got something important to say, so I want to shut up.
No, I'm
Do
just
it.
saying we got 30 seconds.
I don't
want
wanna-
to say more of it. You don't know my hand signals anymore. Don't play baseball. I mean, so, no, guys, look, obviously, we hope these conversations are beneficial to people. We hope that this helps you critically think, as we like to say, spar with ideas in your mind. We have to be able to have these conversations. I am as close to a free speech absolutist, not exclusively, but that you can be. We've got to be able to share our thoughts and engage in the exercise of debating and sparring with our ideas, Lord. Please join us on the after show for about another 30 or 40 minutes. If you do not, have a blessed week and hope that you tune in next week.
George, you're taking over here. No, seriously. We're going to continue talking about this trans movement, this religion that you talked about. And I mean, there has to be some reason that it's continuing. It just will not stop. And I feel that it's getting stronger. One thing that I always say, and it was back the same when it was just like you said, black and white, or vaccine, no vaccine.
Mask, no mask, then vaccine, no vaccine.
It turned violent. People were like punching people out, throwing people out. Yeah. Exactly. Like apologize for being white, or you're killing us because you didn't get vaccinated. And now if you say anything about the trans movement, you're transphobic, which you've explained millions of times now that it's not a fear. Nobody's afraid.
It's not an irrational fear. Phobia, if I tell people that I have arachnophobia, so if you say, Nico, look at that spider across the room on the wall there, that little spider, not even a tarantula, nothing big, and I freak out and I pull a gun out and I start shooting, pop, 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 pop. That's an unreasonable reaction. That's an unreasonable fear of spiders. So nobody's, I mean, the vast majority of people are not phobic. I mean, transphobic or homophobic. I don't understand. It's not an irrational fear of that. What I care about is an indoctrination of children. I want children to be children. I want to be able to raise the children. And if somebody wants to raise their child with that ideology, that's on you. You in the end, if you believe you're going to stand before God, you have to decide and you have to make up your own mind, and that's your child. And that child will function in society at some point, and they'll have to deal with that. You know, you can pick your choices, not your consequences. But don't push it on. I mean, you're talking about they're trying to take away the authority of the parent. That's why the California and the Washington bill that we talked about last week, when you're saying the teachers don't have to tell, look at the Florida story. You don't have to tell the parents anything. And if the parents do something, there's consequences against the parent. And so you're taking away this authority and stewardship over parents. And that's why when I used the example last week, and Solomon made that little video about, you know, a kid can't get a tattoo, and someone made a comment about that. What do you mean? A kid can't get a tattoo. A kid can't put something on their body. A kid can't put permanent ink. I mean, you can actually take it off with a laser. A kid cannot put ink on their body because they don't have the mental stamina or logic, maturity. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. To know what the long-term consequences, and now they're going to have something on their body, their face, their neck forever. But yet they can make decisions on putting hormones and drugs that are going to alter their body, and then actually start cutting their body and having surgery that cannot be reversed. Forget about lasering something off. Cannot be reversed. Right. And that's okay. That makes sense. So when I was trying to give an analogy to say, make it make sense to me how one is not okay and the other one is okay, and how do you join the two and reconcile that? And you can't. And so that's why they have to call you names or get violent. Look, there's got to be a boldness in society. We talk about the nuclear family all the time, and that's why we were very passionate about resisting and standing up against BLM Incorporated. Not Black Lives Matter, the sentiment, BLM Incorporated, the movement, because we knew that it was a Marxist movement that was actually out to destroy and to decimate the nuclear family. And that's not our opinion. It was on their website for the longest time until they took it down because too many people woke up on it. And so it's really about dismantling, as we say, the nuclear family, and to go against traditional values, which includes Christian values. Last point. Someone sent me a video about these insanely ridiculous women on The View. And they had some lady on there. I don't know who the hell she was, but just ignorant. I would love to be on that show, just go at it with them respectfully, professionally, but passionately. She said, I really don't see the difference between fundamental Christianity and the Al-Qaeda or something like that. She made some stupid, I sent that to you, I think, George. It was just such a stupid, irresponsible statement that has no backing. But this is, and no pushback from anybody. No pushback. I mean, that should have been the subject matter for sermons. I mean, literally, because we're trying to influence people, if you're a Christian, to think and live in a Christian mindset. That's what we're trying to do, go into all nations, making disciples of all men, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. Well, then you have to say, look, this way of living is not beneficial to you. It's not in order to God's prescription. Why can you trust God? Why is there a God? Why is his word authoritative and reliable? You have to be able to answer these questions, or else you're just some idiot with two clanging cymbals just going like this, like anybody else. You've got to be able to reason people to the truth. And we have to do that with all positions. And so all I'm saying is churches need to step up and educate people and lovingly, courageously, yes, boldly, speak the truth in love, Ephesians 4:15, and that's not happening at all, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, we always come back and say, what's the philosophy at play here? There's something bigger going on. We have to understand what we're dealing with ideologically to know that this is never going to end. This isn't just going to pass. This isn't just a phase. This is the implementation of communism. It's failed in every single country in which it's been instituted for a reason. Now that's the political system, but there's a political philosophy, and that's Marxism. That's the philosophy under communism, and think about that. What is that? In short, it's a vision of a society in which all men and women are by law and by force, literally forced to be equal. That's what that is. That hasn't died. That's alive and well. That philosophy is permeating its way through American culture right now, and it's being propelled by American academic institutions where kids are a captive audience. Our next generation, our future, is a captive audience to radicalists right now. It's insane. And that's what's being taught every single day. And so how's it showing up? Well, it shows up as social justice and political correctness and diversity and equity and inclusion. These are all buzzwords for the implementation of this philosophy. This is communism, and we have to understand the consequences of that. And so the point is, if this is truly implemented, what we are ensuring is that that conflict between men and women, conflict between the races, conflict between social classes is never going to end. There's no hope of meaningful reconciliation because that philosophy ensures it. It is the only way that you can ensure. And
is it because is it like that way to stay in power? So there's no so you can divide and conquer. Because if you have a society that is unified, then obviously you can push back against power in the government. And if they're at each other's throat, government comes in to clean up the mess, and they become a small G God to fix everything. And then they have a reason now to implement kind of this authoritative power over the community. Is that the underlying
it's the Christian
mindset?
Bible on its head, Nico. It's the use of history and sociology and race and economics and human nature to explain injustices. Whereas the Bible takes a very different tack. The Bible doesn't say that the reason why you're having a hard day is because your neighbor sucks. The Bible says that there's a problem.
You suck.
Yeah. It starts with you. And as a Christian, I believe that when I minimize God in my life, things don't go well. When I declare, as a person of faith, and you and I have talked about this to the men in our Wednesday morning Bible study, that we ask rhetorically, are there areas in your life that are sort of out of reach for Christ, that you've declared unmanageable by Jesus? Like he needs your help. He's not. You're afraid that he's not going to do enough good job, and so he needs your assistance. Areas that you haven't surrendered over to him. Look, this is the temptation. This is why we're afraid, because we can't handle those things well, but we also don't trust God to handle it. So we're caught in this constant prison. And so what Marxism does is it offers a fake solution. It basically offers you more of the same, except it says you're not at fault. Your neighbor's at fault.
Right.
But that's a huge effing lie, because your neighbor's saying the same thing. He's blaming you. And so it's constant, inexorable conflict that never goes away. It's the opposite of what the Bible says. And so what's the answer? Not in that world, there is no answer. This is the status quo. The government wants more of this because then it can insert itself as a solution.
When you talk about the church needs to step up, it makes me think about homeschooling. And let me explain this to you. So the schools are, I'm saying this as a blanket statement, schools are doing a terrible job. The teachers are falling in line with, we are in charge of your children, blanket statement, of course. And so when it comes to churches, and if the churches aren't standing up, and really go to a church. I have my own Bible study, so it's church at home. Doesn't this cause more of a divide when you teach your kids at home, you go to church at home, and it becomes this small group, but the big problem still exists? So how do we bring those ideas of what y'all always talk about to the masses? How do you change a church? How do you change a school district? How do you change teachers?
One person at a time.
Teachers?
One person at a time. Look, you work hard to get into positions of authority. The right people in positions of authority.
I mean, it makes me want to be a teacher. Yeah. Like, I think about that.
Yeah, and you have to be able to put up with some shit. Mm-hmm. You can't change and go against the grain on something as aggressive and deceptive as what we're dealing with now with this left and progressive and these ideological shifts, and not think you're going to take some shots. You got to know, okay, I'm going to get in a fight and I'm going to get hit. I just don't want to get knocked out. And you have to think that way. And too many people have this addiction to comfort. You look, if you take your kid out of this environment, and I'm not criticizing that, I can see why people do that. Then you have to be very careful that you don't put your kid in a bubble. You have to be very, and I always caution against this. I want my kids to suffer enough to be prepared for the battlefield. What are you going to do? I'm going to walk around and stay within a 4-block radius of your house and hope that everything's there and grow your own food forever? I mean, that's you're not going to function very well. And so I want to go out to the battlefield and influence people on the other side. Now, I can completely see it. Don't get me wrong. I understand, but you can't run forever. That's the problem. We've got to go out. If you retreat and take a defensive position and just think in battle, you're always going to be playing defense. A good defense is a better offense, right? Mm-hmm. If you're punching, you're not getting punched. And I mean that figuratively. You got to say that these days, right? I mean, so I'm saying is we need to go out into the place and start changing hearts and minds. If you do homeschool, you just have to prepare your child for life.
Reality.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Reality. I know a lot of people that they kind of live in this little bubble, and the first time they're out of that bubble, they just get bamboozled and decimated by the world. And so, like I said to you guys before, I hold nothing back from my 14-year-old, our 14-year-old. When the 10-year-old old enough, we're training her up too. But all of them, they train. I want to prepare their bodies. I want them to be tough. I want them to love Jesus. I want them to listen to Jesus first, and then listen to us and understand our authority and respect it. And then I go, I want you to know why you're a Christian, not just that you're a Christian. I mean, you need to know why you're a Christian, because there's someone out there that's going to try to change your mind, and you need to try to change their mind. It's always a battle of persuasion. And so, in a sense, what you're saying, Karen, yes, you're right. But I understand it. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, but if we really want to win this and we're playing long ball, how do you do it unless you get into the ring? You're never going to win the title unless you get into the ring. And so we have to decide what winning the title looks like. What do we want to just hold everything off and make sure that that's fine. You can do that if you want to. Or do you want to truly make lasting change generationally? Our founding fathers didn't think, I guess we could get a farm. We can get a lot of guns. We could live in an area. We could hold off the British maybe for a period of time. We can have our own stuff. And maybe they won't even find us because they didn't have radar and all kinds of technology back then. They could have done that, but they said, no, we're going to risk everything. And we're going to get into the fight and we're not even thinking about ourselves, because we already have agreed or come to the realization that life's going to suck for us. But for our kids and for the generations to follow, what are we doing? That's my mind. I'm generational thinking. I'm kingdom-minded. That's the way I look at it. I mean, I think of heaven for my ideas, but I think generationally for my mission field. And I just think we need to start doing that more often.
Yeah, everyone's a teacher. Kitchen table issues, right? These are kitchen table issues. These are everywhere issues. Question, does God dispense, ask your kids this, does God dispense blessings and favor equally? Does he do that? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is obviously no. He didn't treat Abraham the same way he treated Hammurabi, right? The ancient code of law and ethics giver. He chose Abraham. He could have gone to Hammurabi, but he didn't. Did he treat the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Persians equally with Israel? No, he didn't. He favored Israel. did Jesus treat all of his disciples equally? I don't think so. I think it was Peter, James, and John at the Mount of Transfiguration, and only they were present at the Garden of Gethsemane with him, right? So there seems to be these kinds of inequalities that are sort of built into nature and built into human nature. That's to be expected. That's how things go. So how should we understand equality? I love to keep coming back to this term because equality and the bastardization of it is driving all of these politics. It's driving LGBTQ politics. It's driving the sort of dissemination or redistribution of wealth politics. It's driving economics. So I think that as we go forward, because Nico and I will have other opportunities to talk to people, I think we need to keep doubling down on clarifying what true equality is. What is biblical equality? What the Bible teaches is equal responsibility based on the gifts and talents that God has given us. That's what the Bible teaches. Mm-hmm. With whatever you got, are you being responsible? If you have a lot, are you being responsible? If you have little, are you being responsible? The old Luke 12:48 quote, right? Everyone to whom much is given,
much is to be expected.
Much is required. And so I have 5 more gifts. Guess what? I am therefore more accountable. And so that's what we got to come back to. And this used to be part of the American educational system. And so I think we're using it to destroy capitalism, to say that it's unholy, it's terrible, it's abusive, when in fact it is the best system to ensure that this philosophy gets discharged in society. And that's part of what made America great. I want to quote Winston Churchill. I know you like him.
I do like him.
Here's what he said on this issue. The inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. And that's really that's really well said, because that's all you end up doing. Your solution is actually worse than your problem. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I wasn't saying anything. I was listening. I thought that was great. No, that was great. I mean, I thought that was really good. No, look, the bottom line is we don't know what we believe. George and I have talked about this, Karen. You got to know what you believe, and you got to train your children up. I'm probably skewed. I get it. I see it. The social experiment called the justice system. I deal with it every day. I see the testing of ideas in people's lives and how it works out for them, and they end up in the justice system. I see the ideas of a prosecutor. I see the ideas of a judge. I see everybody's definition of justice. I understand the symbol. That's why I love the symbol of our justice system. It's a symbol that is mimicked after the goddess Themis. We know that this goes back to Greek times. You know, the lady, people say Lady Justice. Lady Justice, I mean, she has a blindfold, she holds scales, she has a sword in her hand, her foot's on a book, there's a serpent between her book. All that means something. The goddess Themis was the goddess of order. And that makes sense, right? A justice system should keep order in a society. And she wore a blindfold because it doesn't matter what political persuasion you have, which of the two genders you are, what philosophy you lived by, what your religion was, what your social status was. The justice system, to bring order, is supposed to theoretically have a blindfold on, not a mesh. It's not out of mesh, and she doesn't do this. Her hands are occupied. She has a sword in her left hand because the justice system should be swift when it's appropriate. She puts her foot on the book because she has to have a command of the law to dispense the law properly. When you put your foot on something, that means you're dominated. She has to dominate the law and understand the law. In between her foot and the book, there's a universal symbol. Whether you're a Christian or not, the universal symbol of evil is the serpent. The justice system should crush out evil in a society with the book and with Lady Justice as the dispenser of that. But yet in her right hand, she carries what? The scales. She's got to balance all this shit out. She's got to balance out. She didn't know she was going to be dealing with media. She didn't know she was going to be dealing with political parties, even though there was politics back then and partisanship. She has to dispense and balance it all out to make sure that the blindfold stays on, the sword is sharp, the foot is heavy, the serpent is crushed, and making sure that justice is received. And when you have justice, you have order. If you don't have justice, through truth, objective truth, you have no order. The justice system, I'm very passionate about the justice system. Obviously, I don't believe in Greek goddesses, and I'm a Christian, and I don't believe in a polytheistic mindset. But it still holds true. There needs to be order, and there's no order without truth.
Yeah, because there are overlapping principles.
Absolutely.
And they're true. Absolutely right. So I think you don't have any discourse like this. You don't, and we're starving for it. I mean, we're just absolutely starving for it. But you can't count on teachers. You can't count on Republicans, sorry, you can't. You sure as hell can't count on Democrats. This is, if you're listening, we keep saying the same thing. We end our shows with the same, if you noticed, that's how we wrap it up here, that the power really lies with you guys. It really does. As parents, it lies with you guys. You can reassert control. Like we were talking about the Murdochs reasserting control at Fox News. That's not a good thing, I don't think. But this is a good thing. You're reasserting control over not just what comes into your kids' heads, but how they process that information. Because right now, they're being filled with a lot of hogwash in the public school system, and they're being taught to think about it in a way that's very destructive. And so the only line of defense, that intellectual firewall, is you. And please pray for your kids. Ask God for guidance. If you're not a person of faith, consider being a person of faith. Look at the history of the United States. There's a pretty good reason why the founders of this country thought it was a good idea.
Worldview matters, Karen.
It really does matter.
It's a big discussion that people need to have. How do you see the world? What lens do you look at? What set of principles do you apply? How do you see yourself, your duty to this society, your duty, what happens when you leave this earth? I mean, look, that should dictate everything to me. I mean, that's how you heard me say this over and over again, Karen. I've spoken to a lot of audiences, from Islamic to LGBT to atheist to mixed to Christian to right-wing Christians to this to that, conservative, everything, you name it. And I always tell them all that we all have one thing in common. We're all leaving this earth. Every one of us. Nobody's gotten away with it. It's going to happen. Doesn't matter. You don't even have to pay your taxes. 2 things you have to do in this world: pay your taxes and die. Well, no, you don't have to pay your taxes. There's consequences to it,
right.
But you don't have to pay your taxes. But you do have to leave this earth. What do you believe happens at that moment? Do you believe you come back as a cockroach because you screwed up in this world and you're a shithead? Do you believe you come back as a CEO because I don't know who the hell decides that, right? I mean, that's what's the board that decides that, and how did that happen, and what set of standards do we look at there? What's good and bad? That's always the battlefield. What's good and bad? Do you turn into worm food? Are you going to stand before 72 virgins, or do you stand before a first century Jew that claimed to be God and did some amazing things, and we're still talking about him today? Well, whatever you believe, I would think that your worldview and that moment at passing would dictate how you lead up to that moment. If you think you're going to become worm food, what the hell do you give a shit about what happens, right? It's like, hey, live and let live, do what you want, another day, another dollar, try to get mine, I don't care about you, whatever. Because when people espouse principles, I don't understand where they get it. What are you undergirding those quote-unquote principles? What are your definitions? Definitions matter in this society. Definitions matter for how you live your life and how you make your decisions. Good, evil, moral, immoral, bad, good. I mean, what is righteousness? What does this mean? Virtue? What do these mean? We don't have these discussions. And not all ideas are the same, right? And here's the last point. Not everybody can be right.
That's
We
right.
can all be wrong. Every one of us can be wrong,
Yes.
but we can't all be right.
Yep.
And so we're seeing the intersection, there's a word, right, of all these ideas. And then the idea of do what I say or else, or I want you to be inclusive, as long as you listen to follow my way of doing things, which is not inclusive, but they've redefined that term again. That we're seeing this play out, and when you combine cowardice, meaning no courage to stand for stuff, and then ignorance, meaning not knowing, well, then you have a disaster that we're dealing with today.
Consider that, and then consider the narrative that the average child hears every single day. I can do it in 20 seconds. Here's a lesson on economics. Hey, Johnny, everything that's been gained by your neighbor has been gained at your expense. How do you like them apples? Right? Because, you see, all people are supposed to be equal. If you're poor, Johnny, then it's because someone else was made rich at your expense, on your back. And so basically, if you're not successful, it's not your responsibility, Johnny. It's your neighbor's responsibility. It's his freaking fault if he has more than you. A total flip of the American educational system just 15, 20 years ago that taught personal responsibility. There's a guy by the name, I like his stuff, and I like how he says this. His name is Jude Doherty. He's the Dean Emeritus of the School of Philosophy at Catholic University. I was looking for something that I had read forever ago. I couldn't find it, but I want to give credit to Dr. Erwin Lutzer. By the way, if you guys haven't gotten this book, it's fantastic. It's called We Will Not Be Silenced. And he answers this question. Here's what's going on in the country politically with regard to cultural Marxism and how it's influencing our political system. and here's what the church should be doing about it and how the church ought to be responding. It's a very well-written book. And he has got this quote in there from Jude Doherty. Men differ in strength, intelligence, ambition, courage, perseverance, and all else that makes for success. However, we have not found a method to make men both free and equal. There is no method to make people both free and equal. Why? Because we may be equal in terms of our value before God, Nico, but we are not the same. We are just simply not. And it is a fool's errand and very destructive to assume that we're going to end up with a culture where our lifestyle, our incomes, and our achievements are actually equal. Think about how absurd that is. It's an impossibility. And yet, that is what we are being told is possible. That is what transgenderism is ultimately about. That is what critical race theory is ultimately about. What queer theory is ultimately about. What the racialization of race is about. It is a fool's errand. It's a lie. Step back. Use your podium as parents, friends, spouses, and educate.
But
for
equal
goodness
caring
sakes.
is good. Equal is good. Equal in value, like George said, to God and to our society. That's why Lady Justice wears the blindfold, because she can't see anything. So everybody's equal. If you truly wear a blindfold, then you have equal in value. God, the difference with God is he sees
Equal
exactly
in
how you're.
value.
Yes, that's it.
Yes.
Equal in value.
Amen.
Equal in value. And so, but God sees how you were designed. He gave you a fingerprint to show you, hey, there's my stamp of approval. Boom. Didn't make anyone like you. Threw the mold away. I tell the kids all the time when I do public speaking. I try to encourage them to look at your fingerprint. God put a reminder on you. Screw snowflakes. No one's ever had your fingerprint before. So equal in value is a good thing, and equal in opportunity. So let me tell you where people don't care about equality is in sports. So in NBA, there's 74% of the players are black. It's not equality. When we say, no,
Yeah.
hey, wait a minute, hold on. Because in sports, theoretically, we have a meritocracy that you earn your spot on there. And if you have a 7 foot, I want to compete in the Kentucky Derby. I think the Kentucky Derby's happening this week or this weekend or next week or whatever the hell, I don't know. A friend of mine was going. And, well, if you're 7 foot, you ain't right. You're not competing. You're going to crush the damn horse. I mean, you're not doing it. Well, that's not fair. I don't give a shit if it's fair. It's just the way it is. And then if you're this tall and you're not coordinated, I want to play in the NBA. Well, equal opportunity. Get on your high school team, kick ass. Get on a college team, kick ass. Go try out for the NBA. You have an opportunity. You couldn't make it. You couldn't make it. I mean, Michael Jordan was cut from his high school team. So we have a meritocracy. We've got to look at that. And so this is sameness versus equality. But we've bastardized the word equality. We want equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. We've said that on the show before, and many other people talk about that. But equal in value, great thing. Our justice system, the way God looks at us. And equal in opportunity, a wonderful thing. That's the American dream.
It is.
And but we're not the same, and we're not supposed to be the same. But nobody talks about the meritocracy in our sports. Nobody talks about that. We want the best. That's it, plain and simple. You want equal equal outcome on pilots, but this one's not that good. I don't care, but it's the right color. No, I want the best pilot. I want the best surgeon. I want the best lawyer. I want the best whatever. I mean, nobody does this when it comes down to real issues that affect your life. But it sounds great, but it's not great. And so we've got to get over this shit. We've got to be able to talk and explain this and just discuss this. And because this equality of outcome is truly damaging. I don't want my kid to have a participation trophy. We will never, ever, ever receive a participation trophy.
Exactly.
Let me tell you this. What I tell my kids, if they compete in a tournament, whether you win or lose, I want you to leave it on the mat. I want you to try your best. You do it. You train hard. You perform to your God-given potential. And whatever the outcome, that doesn't change your value to me. I will still give my life for you in a heartbeat. I will still take a life for you in a heartbeat. I love you. Mommy and Papi love you. God loves you even more than we love you, by the way. Jesus loves you more. We always tell them that. And just know that. So this has nothing to do with your value. This is an accomplishment. And I want you to strive for that accomplishment. I wanted you to take pride in your accomplishments. But whether you win or lose doesn't change your value to me and mommy. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
And we've got to. But if my kid doesn't win, oh, well, here you go, Johnny or Leah or Maya or Zaiter or Mike. Don't give that to me. They don't need that crap from you. Because their value doesn't come from what you think or whether they are successful or whether there's a setback. So I don't like to think in the terms of losing. There's a setback. When you lose, that means you're done. I've lost in the game of life. We say in the martial arts world, you either win or you learn. So you learn for the next time. There's a setback, no doubt about it, but there's not a loss. I don't look at it that way. I was set back. I wasn't successful in that opportunity because it's a mindset. As a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Proverbs 23:7. If you call yourself a loser, you'll act like a loser. That's not mind games. That's a reality to me. It's your mindset.
I love that.
I don't know how you top that.
I love
Well,
that.
I mean, it's just the way you got to do it.
I'm so embarrassed to say that what kind of mother am I that when there were those sports.
Well, I'm not trying to make you feel
listen.
bad.
When there were those sports at school for my daughters, I was like, what did y'all get? Did you get a ribbon? Nah, we stayed in the bathroom because we knew we weren't going to do anything and we didn't want the ribbon.
They didn't want the ribbon?
They were like, they're not sporty girls. And I was like,
They don't
oh
have
my
to be.
God. I know, but
They
I
don't
was
have
like,
to be.
oh my God.
Look,
my kids
Maya,
were
let me
hiding
tell
in the
you.
bathroom.
So Maya, our oldest daughter, you know Maya very well, obviously. I mean, this chick is funny as
I
hell, man.
know.
She's funny. I just enjoy her personality, but she's not a great dancer. Sorry if she watches this. And my wife is a dance instructor.
I know.
Davi is. I mean, I mean, it's so sincere. She went to school. Her degrees in different dance studies.
She put Shakira to shame.
I mean, my wife just is
She
all
really
kinds of different dance. She used to compete in salsa and all that stuff, and she teaches. But Maya has taught herself to dance well. Maya she's worked on her rhythm. Rhythm's not natural for Maya, right? But she dances like she's the best in the world, and I love it. I love that. And we laugh about it, we joke about it, you know. And Aaliyah dances better. Everybody has their different. They take after Maya. No, but I'm just saying.
So much for equality, man.
Well, no, I'm just saying. But Maya's her creativity. She puts these videos together. They're so creative. Her mind is different, and then Leah's different. Leah's doing wrestling this morning, and she's training because she's a mauler, but she's real quiet. But she'll jack you up. I mean, and then Zaito's just is, and they're unique.
Yes,
And we celebrate
yes.
their uniqueness. And they're valued, they're loved equally, equally loved by mommy and papi and by Jesus, right? But they're not the same.
Exactly.
I can't love them the same.
I know.
Because what's an expression to love to Maya is different than Leah
I love
and
that.
different than Zaiter. But we don't do that in society.
Yeah.
And we've got to learn to do that. And we have to be okay with that. And it's a good thing. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful. We have the same philosophy and do the same thing in our home. This shouldn't be controversial.
No.
I know.
This is this is how American families have raised their kids, and there's a Judeo-Christian ethic behind that, and this is the very thing that this cultic Marxist philosophy is really trying hard to destroy. And I want people to grasp how critical this moment is in our history. We can't turn the country over to this kind of destructive radicalism. The nuclear family is perhaps the greatest obstacle, the greatest enemy, I think, Nico, to the implementation of Marxism. He taught that there's a tendency. I mean, think about how nasty this is. It's unbelievable. It sounds great, but it's just unbelievably evil at its core. The tendency that there's a tendency for the children of the rich to inherit wealth. And that there's a tendency for children of the poor to, guess what, have poverty passed on. And so he would argue that, hey, this is systemic. You see the systemic inequality?
The
That's
mindset is
terrible.
systemic.
So we're going to change that, he says. Let's just burn the whole thing down. Let's have the state own all the wealth. See? We're just going to take it off the table. The state will own all the wealth, and then what the state will do is they'll just distribute it more evenly to all its citizens. Now, I know in the process, all of your freedoms will be abolished because you kind of need wealth to be able to exercise, the uniqueness of your talents and the giftings that God's given you and your entrepreneurship. We understand that's kind of an inconvenience, but think about how wonderful it'll be that everybody's equal down to the core. And that's what it sounds good. It sounds like, wow.
It doesn't sound good to me.
Well,
but
It doesn't sound good to anybody
Yeah,
that
to a kid,
understands
yeah.
it right.
But this is important because you grow up and you've got adults that are behaving like children. They don't think through what the implications are. See, you're thinking through at light speed, but it doesn't work that way.
No.
I'm sorry. But the average person who's raised in this bullshit can be a 75-year-old child.
Yes.
And that's the point.
An adult infant.
How old you are doesn't make you mature. I know lots of, I hate to say not lots, I know some 9-year-olds that are unbelievably immature and never got beyond that kind of childish thinking. And so, let's abolish all these pesky salaries that are disproportionate based on your credentials and contributions to a company. Let's abolish all of that. Let's get rid of all these weird economic opportunities and just make it all level. And what you're doing is you're creating slaves. You're not creating citizens.
Isn't that what Biden's doing with the interest rates?
Yes.
It's exactly. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. It's like, so you have a great interest rate. You have a shitty one. You've been responsible. You've been irresponsible.
Right.
You know what? We're going to borrow from you. Because what it does, think about this, and the exercise that I saw a long time ago when you play it into a school setting is your kid is smart. You got a 98. You consistently get in the 90s. You consistently get in the 70s. Instead of encouraging this kid, say, I'm going to take from your 90. Well, guess what? The kid in the 90s goes, well, screw this shit. I'm not going to keep studying. For what?
Right.
I'm not even going to do. So then now the 90 goes, well, I'm going to just perform at a 70 because I'm going to get it anyway. The problem is nobody performs at a 90 because nobody's incentivized to. The meritocracy is taken away. The reward or the consequence in a positive way to your efforts and your talents is taken from you. So we're playing God again. And then now we're not giving you any motivation. So then everybody becomes a 70. The problem is nobody stays in the 70. Everybody ends up with the 40s.
Yep.
Because nobody's doing shit and nobody's prepared to do it. Nobody's learned how to accomplish and to study. That's the effect of all this bullshit. And people have got to learn that. If my kid never wins a tournament ever, or never gets 100 whatever, if I know that they're performing at their best. One time Maya was in an in-school tournament at Ohana, and she was mauling with this kid, a boy who was wrestler, and she was early on in jiu-jitsu. This was years ago. And I mean, everyone started watching how hard she was competing. And my chest was just expanding. Now, she ended up not winning the round, the tournament, by 1 point. I couldn't, Papi, okay? I couldn't shut up. I was so proud of the effort.
Yep.
She left it all on the mat. That to me, and that's how God works. Because just use the talents I gave you to the best. My best might be somebody else. My 100% might be somebody else's 70. I can't perform like Michael Jordan when he was at his highest, and Michael Jordan can't do some things that I can do probably, and vice versa. That's the true diversity of God's design and the beauty of how it works together, all to live in a society, and we all benefit from that. We have to acknowledge our strengths and our weaknesses. The true leader of an organization, and I'd say this all the time, you guys have heard me say it, but I don't know who hasn't. I'm great at what I'm great at, I'm good at what I'm good at, and I suck at what I suck at. A true leader gets great people at what you're good at around you, and gets at least good, if not great people at what you suck at for sure. And then I'll take care of what I'm great at. And that's when you have a full-rounded organization. And the leader knows what to do with everybody and how to show them to move forward and accomplish your goals. So we've lost that today in society, Karen. Look, there's a lot to talk about. We didn't talk about Don Lemon, poor bastard.
Nobody is.
We should. Well, you know what? Look, here's what I don't do. Proverbs 24:17 says, do not gloat when your enemy falls, right? God bless you.
Bless you.
Do not gloat when your enemy falls or stumbles. And do not let your heart rejoice. So even if, and this is where I take myself, even if I don't say something, if somebody I don't like falls, I have to check my heart. I love that the word of God always gets deeper. Doesn't gets into what you're thinking, gets behind, peels the onion back and gets into our mindset, taking your thoughts captive. As a man thinks, so he is. And so I don't rejoice in Don Lemon, even though I really didn't like him. I wouldn't rejoice in Joy Behar if something bad happened to her, or Whoopi, or any of those very unhappy ladies on The View. And matter of fact, if they ever wanted to talk about their salvation and have a really honest and respectful conversation about Christianity or conservatism or whatever, I would happily do it, Or if they wanted to debate, I'd do that too. But I don't wish harm on them. And that's a hard issue. So we shouldn't do that. But we should talk about Don Lemon. We kept mentioning Don Bongino, because that's a big deal. But it was just Dan. Sorry, Dan. Okay. I'm sorry. I was thinking of Don Lemon. Dan Bongino. So we should, that's been drowned out. He was a very powerful voice. His style was not everybody's style, but he was, his mindset, he's Secret Service, law enforcement, he's kicking open the door. He's that first dude that you want to ram the door to get in there to save you. That's his style.
Yeah, that piece from Breitbart actually expanded on that, Nico.
But nobody talking about Dan.
Said that while they wanted Carlson out,
they wanted Bongino to stay.
Oh, they just couldn't come to an agreement.
That's right. They couldn't come to. They actually wanted him to work longer hours, and he didn't want to work longer hours. He didn't want to work on Saturdays, for example. Who can blame him? So they were unable to come together on some of the contractual terms.
Got it.
Until the Dominion lawsuit, and at that point, they decided to wash their hands of him. Now, they did want him to come back for another show, and he said thanks, but no thanks, as opposed to what they did with Carlson. So the dynamics are a little bit different there, but it's interesting in the end, after the Dominion lawsuit, they didn't have to wash their hands of Bongino. They could have continued with their negotiations, but they didn't. They decided, I think that's why that article was appealing to me.
What is Dan doing now? I haven't heard anything about that.
No, I think I thought
still
he's doing
his online.
He's doing well.
Yeah.
He's doing fantastically well. Look, I like the discussion that we had here because it's good to talk about the philosophy on the other side. What's driving this ideology? It seems to never end. I want people to grasp the fact that it's never going to stop because the philosophy at its root is deeply invested in constant conflict. Remember, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels both wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848, and it is a centerpiece that the monogamous family needs to be destroyed. That's a centerpiece of the book.
And God.
Exactly right. And the redefinition of equality and the idea that you can blame capitalism on that capitalism is actually practiced in the home and that it's considered these oppressive clusters. And they want us to go back to what they call tribal societies because they were classless. Children and property were community owned. Children were raised by the village. People enjoyed sexual freedom. You see where we're going? So this is a remaking of American culture. They're tearing it down in every way. They're going after social and political, economic and cultural. Every one of those fundamental pillars is under attack. That's why this will never end. They need perpetual conflict or the whole balloon blows up. So
Karen,
what are we going to do about it?
Karen, land the plane.
We're
been here
done.
45
We're done.
Right?
We have so many other topics that we can continue on next week, but isn't next Saturday voting day, May 6th, is it?
Is that already? Oh, guys, look, vote against Prop A. Damn, we should have talked about that on the radio. I didn't realize that.
Well, we'll be here. I think it's Saturday, isn't it? I think
but
it is next Saturday.
Voting's happening right now.
Vote.
Look, just, you guys got to educate yourself and encourage people to educate themselves about Prop A. Vote against that.
I think
trash.
It's early voting. It's
already
today
started.
Also. Yeah, I already voted, so it started last
week. Vote
week.
against Prop A. Vote against Prop A for sure. Whatever you do, vote against Prop A.
With all your heart.
Yeah. That's it.
That's it. God bless you guys. Have a great week.